Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is warning that Israel's current focus on its confrontation with Iran may be temporarily limiting what it is prepared to do in Syria. But he argues that the pause should not be mistaken for a change in intent. Speaking as regional tensions remain high, Fidan said Israel appears to be postponing certain steps in Syria because its priority is the Iran front. But he cautioned that once the timing suits Israel, those postponed actions could return quickly to the agenda. And he urged governments in the region, including Syria's new leadership in Damascus, not to relax their vigilance. Asked to Hakan, Fidan said, currently, due to the ongoing conflict in Iran, it is not undertaking certain actions, but that does not mean it will not eventually come to pass. Fidan's message was framed not as speculation, but as a warning to partners and rivals alike. Turkey is already looking beyond the immediate crisis, he suggested, and assessing what could come next, particularly in Syria, which Ankara consistently describes as directly tied to Turkey's national security. When he was pressed on whether Israel's restraint reflected a lack of capability or a deliberate choice, he rejected the idea that Israel had hit operational limits. In his view, the difference is strategic, not logistical. Israel has chosen to keep its attention on Iran for now. Asked to Hakan Fidan said, no, absolutely not. I mean, at this very moment, that's not its priority. At it, he argued that Israel may simply be waiting for what he described as a more opportune moment, language that signals Turkey's expectation that an escalation in Syria remains possible, even if it is not imminent. And he made clear that Ankara believes it must plan for the full range of outcomes. Fidan also offered a glimpse of how Turkey sees the diplomatic landscape shifting in Damascus. He said Syria's authorities are not frozen in place or isolated. Instead, he described them as actively conducting diplomacy with major actors, including Washington and even Israel, in an effort to stabilize their position while the region is being reshaped by war and negotiations. Hakan Fidan said from a diplomatic standpoint, whether it be with the Americans or with the Israelis, they thankfully encounter no difficulties whatsoever in conducting the essential discussions and in steadfastly defending their stances. At the same time, Fidan pointed directly to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government as the driver of Israel's strategic posture, and he said Turkey is taking steps accordingly, language meant to convey deterrence, preparedness, and a readiness to respond if Israel's actions in Syria expand. From Ankara's standpoint, Syria is not a distant theater. Turkish officials routinely define the northern belt of the Middle East as a security zone where shifts in military balance can quickly become domestic security issues for Turkey. Fidan's remarks fit that pattern, arguing that any adjustment in Israeli military posture in Syria would carry immediate implications for Turkey, and that Turkey may not be able or willing to stand aside if it believes its interests are threatened. That warning was reinforced by the broader political tone coming from Turkey's top leadership. Fidan's comments followed statements by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has publicly intensified his condemnation of Israel's military campaign in Gaza and its regional operations, while also raising the prospect, at least rhetorically, of Turkish action if the conflict continues to widen. The messaging from Ankara in this period has sounded coordinated, a combination of public deterrence, direct moral condemnation, and signals that Turkey is keeping options open. The goal appears to be to discourage Israeli moves before they happen, while also positioning Turkey as a central actor capable of shaping the region's future order. As the rhetoric escalates, Israel's response, NNC has also sharpened. Israeli officials have portrayed Erdogan's warnings as bluster and hypocrisy, pointing to Turkey's past military interventions and accusing Ankara of pursuing its own regional ambitions while condemning others. Among the Israeli voices reacting publicly, Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu has been cited as dismissing Erdogan's posture and urging Israel to consider a harder diplomatic line, including calls in some accounts for reducing or severing ties. The exchange reflects a widening political conflict, not only over Gaza, but over influence across the eastern Mediterranean, Syria, and the broader post-Iran balance. The dispute is no longer confined to speeches. Turkey has also moved to add legal pressure, with reports that prosecutors in Istanbul have sought to build cases against Netanyahu and other Israeli officials, tied in Turkish accounts to alleged war crimes and to incidents involving maritime activism linked to Gaza. Israeli leaders have rejected Turkey's legal moves and responded with counter-accusations and personal attacks on Erdogan. In Ankara's messaging, those legal developments are presented as part of a broader international trend. Turkish officials have pointed to cases and proceedings in international courts, arguing that Israel's leadership faces mounting scrutiny abroad. In this context, Turkey's foreign ministry has issued sharply worded statements accusing Israeli officials of insulting Erdogan and misrepresenting Turkey's position, while also accusing Netanyahu's government of prolonging conflict for political survival. Turkey's language has grown increasingly confrontational, including comparisons aimed at delegitimizing Israel's leadership on the world stage. The rhetorical escalation has been paired with warnings about potential sabotage and provocation that could derail diplomacy. Erdogan has cast Israel as a disruptive force that could undermine negotiations, including any attempts to manage or reduce tensions between Iran and the United States. Israel, in turn, has accused Erdogan of aligning himself with hostile actors and inflaming regional instability. Inside Israeli strategic circles, some analysts have increasingly argued that Turkey should be treated not simply as a noisy critic, but as a long-term strategic challenger. Commentary in Israeli media has described a potential post-Iran regional landscape in which Turkey's blend of state power, military reach, and diplomatic influence could make it a more complex competitor than non-state networks or proxy-based threats. One line of analysis suggests Ankara could try to lead, or at least shape, a new alignment among Sunni-majority powers, potentially involving states such as Saudi Arabia and Egypt, while also building relationships further afield. In this view, a weakening Iran could open space for Turkey to expand its role, including through its presence in Syria and its political positioning on Palestine. Even so, there are also signs of caution behind the threats. Despite Turkey's military footprint in northern Syria, Ankara has largely avoided direct confrontation in areas near Israeli-controlled or Israeli-influenced zones. That gap between rhetoric and action suggests both sides understand the risks of a direct clash and may still be calibrating moves to avoid crossing a threshold that would trigger open conflict. The tension, however, continues to rise, and it is unfolding alongside sweeping claims from Israel's leadership about the scale and success of its regional military operations. In a lengthy public address framed as a message to the Israeli public, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu portrayed Israel as having transformed the strategic map of the Middle East. He described Israel as moving from being choked by multiple hostile fronts to reversing the pressure on its enemies. As Thatches, Benjamin Netanyahu said Yen tried to put us in a chokehold. Hamas in Gaza, Yesba in Lebanon, the Assad regime in Syria, the militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and Iran itself. He argued that Israel struck at what he called the head of the octopus, Iran, to prevent it from reaching nuclear weapon capability, and he credited both covert and overt operations over time. In his account, Israel took a decisive step when Israeli aircraft began striking deep inside Iranian territory, a moment he described as historic. Asterisk Benjamin Netanyahu said, "Our courageous pilots, we are flying through the skies of Iran. We are flying through the skies of Iran, and we are striking targets all across the entire territory of Iran." Adams Netanyahu also emphasized Israel's partnership with the United States, claiming that American forces fought alongside Israel for an extended period in a shared campaign. He presented that alliance as unprecedented, both militarily and politically, and as a pillar of Israel's new deterrent posture. Benjamin Netanyahu said the United States of America, the most powerful nation on the entire planet, would be fighting right alongside us, shoulder to shoulder and wing-towing for a period of almost 40 full days against our shared common enemy. In his telling, Israeli strikes, in cooperation with the U.S., dismantled Iran's nuclear infrastructure and severely reduced its missile production capacity. He said Israel targeted senior nuclear scientists, key facilities, and industrial components tied to Iran's military power. Netanyahu then made sweeping claims about Iran's internal vulnerability, arguing that Israel's campaign weakened Iran's regime to its most fragile state in decades. He listed senior Iranian leaders he said were eliminated, and he described strikes on what he portrayed as the Revolutionary Guard's economic foundations, including energy and industrial sectors. He also laid out Israel's approach on multiple fronts surrounding it, describing security zones established inside neighboring territories to prevent armed growth, PS from positioning on Israel's borders. In Gaza, he said Israel controls more than half the territory and is pressing Hamas from multiple directions. In Syria, he described Israel's footprint extending across strategic terrain, including Mount Hermon, and down toward the Yarmouk area. He presented Lebanon as a case where Israel's force reshaped the political environment. Netanyahu said Hezbollah's arsenal was devastated and that Israel created a buffer strip inside Lebanon to push threats farther from Israeli communities. He described continued operations and asserted that Israel's military posture has led to something he described as unprecedented: approaches by Lebanon for direct peace talks conditioned, in his words, on Hezbollah's full disarmament and on a comprehensive peace agreement. Throughout, Netanyahu's argument was that strength has changed Israel's diplomatic standing, that military success draws cooperation and alliances, while weakness repels them. He claimed that Israel has become the strongest regional power, even suggesting global influence. Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel today is stronger than ever before. And he closed with a message of determination, framing the campaign as unfinished but defining its trajectory as victory, with a line intended to become a rallying phrase. Benjamin Netanyahu said this nation will rise like a lion, and like a lion it will prevail. Taken together, the dueling narratives from Ankara and Jerusalem point to a region bracing for what comes after the immediate Iran-centered crisis and fearing that the next stage could shift the pressure back onto Syria. For Turkey, Fidan's warning signals an expectation that Israel's priorities can change quickly and that when they do, Syria could again become a focal point. Ankara is signaling that it sees Syria as inseparable from Turkish security and that it is preparing for scenarios in which it may feel compelled to act. For Israel, Netanyahu's speech is designed to project dominance and deterrence, presenting Israel as the actor reshaping the map, not reacting to it, and to signal that Israel will keep enforcing its red lines across borders, whether in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, or beyond. With rhetoric now edging into explicit threats, legal offenses, and strategic repositioning, the confrontation between Turkey and Israel is becoming a defining feature of the region's next phase. Even as diplomacy continues behind the scenes, and even as leaders on all sides try to calculate how close they can move to the brink without falling over.